Greetings, everybody. My name is Dave Rice. I'm coming to you from St. Louis University. Tonight, we're just going to take a look at some information about financial aid and information about filing our FAFSA, which opens on October 1st. We'll talk about different types of financial aid, FAFSA eligibility requirements, some federal student aid identifier information, or our FSA ID. We'll walk through the 21-22 FAFSA. We'll have discussion of expected timelines, and our Q&A session is interesting in a recording, but I will give you some of the typical questions that we get at the end of these presentations. Financial aid can get to moving pretty fast, but it really is just these four things: scholarships, grants, loans, and employment opportunities. Scholarships are the merit-based pieces of aid, things that come from our academics, our GPAs, our ACT scores, from sports, music, theater, different talents that our students have. Those are the merit awards. Grants are the need-based awards. They come from the FAFSA is the cornerstone of those awards. They come from our federal government, our state government, and from the schools. Talk about three different loan programs. There's federal student loans, federal parent loans, and private parent and student loans. And then we'll talk about employment opportunities. So why file the FAFSA? Well, it determines eligibility for federal, state, and institutional aid. Just by filing a FAFSA, it gives our students access to the federal student loan programs, even if they don't qualify for some of the grant programs. It really only takes about a half an hour to complete. It's free. And you know what? You just never know. I mean, it's worth taking a shot. You never know until you actually try. And at institutions these days, that a lot of schools are giving need-based aid for a wide range of students. So who's eligible to file the FAFSA? Must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment of eligibility of program of study. And I would say some people might say, well, I'm not quite there as of October 1st. You can still go ahead and file October 1st, but to be eligible to receive the results, the aid from the FAFSA, you'll need to be accepted or enrolled in an eligible program of study. You must be pursuing a degree or certificate or credential. You must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-U.S. citizen. Males aged 18 and over must be registered for selective service, and you must have a valid social security number. There's a lot of jargon in financial aid, and I just really want to give you two terms to remember and at least have heard. First one is expected family contribution. We fill out the FAFSA, that's the application. We get back what's called a student aid report, and on that is an expected family contribution. It can be anything from 0 to 999,000. From 0 to about 5,700 returns a federal Pell Grant. 0 was a max Pell Grant of $6,345 this past year, down to a Pell Grant of about $695 on a sliding scale of $100 increments. It is a federal formula. It's not a school formula that once you know your EFC, that is good at every school that you're looking at across the country. The other term that we'll talk about is cost of attendance. That represents the maximum amount of financial aid that you can receive from any school, and it's made up of these things. It's made up of the direct costs, the tuition fees, room and board if our students are living on campus, but there are some indirect costs that also play into the cost of attendance, things like books and supplies, transportation, loan fees, miscellaneous. And you might say, well, why are books and supplies? I would think they're charged directly from the school. These days, in a lot of schools, the bookstore is not actually part of the school. At St. Louis University, Barnes & Noble is our bookstore. So those would be non-direct costs as well. But that just represents the maximum amount of aid that you can receive from any one school. It also plays into the equation when we think of need-based aid eligibility. And the equation, don't get lost in these details, but the equation goes something like this. Let's imagine that column 1 there is our 4-year private universities, maybe our most expensive college choice. Our 4-year publics maybe are a little less expensive, column 2, and column 3, our community colleges, maybe the least expensive of the 3 college choices. We can see that the expected family contribution is the same at all of this. It's not different because one has a higher or lower price tag. So cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. And that plays into the equation for some of the need-based aid eligibility for some of the awards. Things like federal work studies need-based. Subsidized federal loans are need-based. So that's the equation. Again, don't get lost in those details. It's just good to have seen that equation and have a sense of what that process looks like. So what do we need to get started? We'll need a student and parent FSA ID. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. We'll need about 30 minutes of time. We'll need our 2019 tax documents, our tax return, our W-2s, our bank statements, financial records, current account statements and investment records, and a list of schools that we want to send our FAFSA results to. This is a screenshot of the FSA ID screen. You can see it's very simple. An FSA ID is just a username and password. To create one, we just have to put in our name, our date of birth, and our social security number. So again, remember, we'll need one for our student and one for at least one of the parents. Just make sure you pay close attention. And when you're putting in student information, that you're actually putting in their birth date and their social security number. Sometimes if we parents are doing that, it's easy to get those numbers confused with our numbers. So just pay close attention when you're creating that FSA ID to make sure you're matching that information up correctly. So let's take a look at the FAFSA. All of the federal sites this year have been combined into one site. So the old FAFSA.ed.gov site is gone. The studentloan.gov site is gone. So we will log in straight from the home page of studentaid.gov is the new site where everything is all together. You can see the blue arrow they're pointing to apply for aid. We would click on that, and right from there there's a drop down. I click to take us right to the FAFSA completion form, and that's this page, and we can see where we would click on the start here to begin filing our FAFSA. This page has a little bit more information. I'll kind of show you the other information here. There's a portion of it where you can put in your year and your state and see what those deadlines are for your state for things like state grants and things like that. There is just tons and tons of good information on this page. Look at things like understanding your aid, apply for aid. Here's where we can complete the FAFSA. That's where we would click to get to where we are now. Complete the aid processes, different loan processes. We can manage our student loans, more info. There's just tons and tons of good information on this site. So take advantage of that. I encourage you to not just go there to file your FAFSA, take advantage of some of that really good information that's out there. So once we get ready to actually log into the FAFSA, we need to tell them, we're just telling it if we're the student completing this information or if we're the parent. So if we're the student, we're clicking that button and we're putting in our information. If we're the parent, we're clicking that, but we're also still putting in the student information here because it's just gathering the information for the person that we're actually filing the FAFSA for. You know, this is a federal form and a federal process, and there is a warning here just to make sure that we take this seriously. There's a lot of identity theft that goes on these days, but this is a federal form, and the identity theft or the falsification of information is taken very seriously. So it's a disclaimer there that we're accepting that we're going to follow their process. Just make sure when you get out there that you actually file the 21-22 FAFSA. You can see that the 2021 is still there because we still have spring semester and summer to go that FAFSA will apply to. Just make sure you complete the 21-22 FAFSA. If you happen to complete the wrong one, no harm, no foul. You'll just need to come back and complete the other one. You'll want to create a save key just in case you get stopped for any reason along the way, that you can save your information, come back to finish it later. But make sure you put that someplace safe, just like you put your FSA IDs someplace safe that you can get back to them. You can use those FSA IDs in future years and for each of your students. This is just an information page if you want to take a look at some of that information while you're there. Just some of the different pieces of the FAFSA. But the FAFSA does a really good job. There'll be some tabs up top to let you know exactly where you're at in the FAFSA as you're going through it. So this is some good information if you want to take a look. So we've been putting in our students' information, their social security number, name, their date of birth, and the flow of this. You can kind of see up here at the top what I was talking about. Here's the different tabs. So right now we're just in the student demographic section. This is the initial information that we're putting in. We're just clicking next to keep navigating through the FAFSA. We'll go through this demographic information pretty quick. Again, here's just putting an email address, making us re-enter it so it's correct. We would put in our telephone number on this same page. Putting in our address here. Just make sure that you take your time and make sure all that information is correct as you enter it. This question is asked, remember this is a demo presentation, so this family lives in Maryland and it's asking, have you lived there at least 5 years? These questions pertain to eligibility for state grant programs. So we're saying yes. Also, it's asking us about our citizenship status. And in this case, we're saying, yes, I am a U.S. citizen. Student information regarding their academic level for the upcoming year. First of all, we're confirming that we have our high school diploma. There's a few, you can see there's a drop-down menu there. There's a few other choices, but for most of us, we're probably saying this is for our students. So they have a high school diploma. And we'll say for this next year, they're going to be working toward their first bachelor's degree, even if they're going to be working toward a professional degree or something as their end degree. On this particular question for next year, for right now, we want to say working on our first bachelor's degree. Will you have your bachelor's degree before 2020, before the next school year begins? And we're just saying no to that. Are you interested in federal work study? I encourage you to say yes, that you're interested in it, even if later on you might change your mind. If you say no, then schools may not consider you for it, even if you're eligible. So that just says yes, you can see if you're eligible or not. There's some humor in this demo as we go through it. We're filling this out for Helen, but we're saying that Helen is a male student, so we can answer the selective service questions here. So we're saying, have you registered for are you registered for selective service? And we're saying no. Do you want to be registered for selective service? We're saying yes. And sometimes we get questions of, well, my student's only 17. Does he have to register now? If he just says yes to this, when he turns 18, he'll be registered for selective service. Is really the easiest way to go about it. If you say no, you'll have to go through the process when he turns 18 of actually getting registered, and then you'll have to provide that documentation to the school. Without male students who are going to be 18 years of age or older during the school year, if they have not registered for selective service, they're simply not eligible for federal student aid. So this is really the easiest way to take care of that. Putting in driver's license and state information on the screen. This again is for the student. Some questions here. Are you a foster youth or at any time when the foster care system? Answer yes or no, but in this case we'll say no. The next two questions are about our parent education levels. And so for right now, for parent one, we'll say college or beyond, and for parent two, we'll say high school. But you can see there's drop-down menus there for you to answer appropriately for your family. So we've completed, as you can see, we've completed the demographic section. We're moving on to the school section, but it's telling us that we've completed that successfully. So now it's going to begin to ask us questions about our high school. And for the demo here is telling, we know our family lives in Maryland, but for this information, we're actually plugging in Iowa information. This is a Homeland Security question. You might be like, why is high school information Homeland Security? Because the folks that flew the planes into the towers on 9/11 had falsified their high school information in order to get into college, and so they take that very seriously now. So you'll want to kind of type in your information, but you're going to want to click search to verify that it has to be exactly the way it is in the FAFSA. So you'll type search. It brings up the possibilities for those high schools, and we're going to say West Senior High School for Iowa City. We're going to click on the select button, and then it puts that information in exactly how FAFSA reads it. If you just type that in there, even if we had said West High School, Iowa City, it wouldn't have recognized that, and you could have an error under FAFSA. So make sure you do that search and put that information in exactly the way it goes. So now we're at the section where we're going to select the schools that we want to receive this FAFSA information. So we can select up to 10 schools. There's instructions here if we want to read them, but basically here's our choices. Do you know the school's federal school code? Each school has a federal school code, and if we know that, we could type yes. If the screen will change, we can type in that code and move from there. If we don't know it, we can select, if we know that our school is in the state of Missouri, we can select Missouri, and it'll give us a list of all the schools in Missouri. If we know the city, it kind of narrows it. Or we know the school name, but then it'll bring that information up. But if we do know the school's federal school code, we can just type it in here and hit search, and it'll bring that information up. And I believe this was for St. Louis Community College, and we can check that box, and then that means that St. Louis Community College will receive this information. We can also see college information about that school, and we can then click to add more schools if we want to. And in our case, we went through that step about 4 times, and we added 4 different schools. And in this screen now, we're actually also saying what will the housing plans be for those schools? So there's 3 different choices. One is with parent, one is on campus, and one is off campus. We talked about cost of attendance a minute before. Based on these answers, that plays into how that the amount that cost of attendance is set at. This is just some of the example of the information we get back on the schools. It actually gives it in a vertical format in the FAFSA, but I kind of tried to put it all into one screen here for you. Just good information to compare about some of the statistics for those schools. All right, so we've completed the school section. It's telling us that that is complete. Now we're going to talk about dependency status for our student. Are they going to be dependent and have to provide parent information, or will they be independent and not be required to provide parent information? So first question is, are you married? We're going to say we're single today, and remember, we're answering on behalf of our student. Do you have children that receive more than 50% of their support from you between July 20 and June 30, 2021? Remember, it's not just does our student have dependents of their own, but are they the ones that are providing more than 50% of that support? So if that answer is yes, we say yes, our student would be independent. But if we say no, then they're still not independent. Do you have dependents other than your own children that you're providing more than 50% of the support for? And again, that's if our student is providing that support. And again, we'll say no here. Other things that could make them independent: are you in the armed services? Are you a veteran? Anytime since you turned 13 were you awarded the court? Are you an emancipated minor? Are you in a legal guardianship? If we say yes to any of those, we would be independent, or we would be dependent. We would be independent, but those don't apply to us either, so we're checking none of the above and moving on. At any time after July 1 of 2019, were you homeless or at risk of being homeless? Again, we could say yes, but we'll say no. So answering those questions the way we did says that we will be dependent on the FAFSA. We will be required to provide parental information. So we're saying yes, that we will provide that. If we say no, that we won't, then technically we're only eligible for unsubsidized federal student loans. We would not be eligible for any of the grant programs at all. So now we're moving into the parent demographics section. So our parents' marital status, we're saying married or remarried. We're saying they were married in June of 1999. And this is parent 1. So parent 1, this is their social number, their name, their date of birth, and their email address. It's not going to ask us for another email address for parent 2. It's going to assume that those are both the same. But this is parent 1. Same information for parent 2 without the email address. Putting the social name, date of birth. Again, pay real close attention. Make sure that information is right. It goes through Homeland Security checks and things to make sure that those names and dates of birth and social numbers all match. This is the state grant question again. Have our parents lived in the state of Maryland for the last 5 years? And yes. So parent demographics here still. This is a very, very important screen. This has a huge impact on what that EFC turns out to be, and that is calculating the number in our family and the number in college. So these have been pre-filled because we know we've already said there's 2 parents, so that's pre-filling. There's obviously 1 student or we wouldn't be filing a FAFSA. But are there any other dependent children in the family? How many are there? Yeah, put that number here. Is there any other dependents other that are not children, but that are living in the family that the family's providing more than 50% of their support? So we put that number there. So in our equation right now, there's 3 in the family and 1 in college. Just note this: if one of the parents or even both of the parents are actually college students too, they would not be students down here. It's only the dependents of those parents that would count down here. So we've completed our parent demographic information, and now we're moving on to the parent financials. We're going to move through this process 2 different ways. We're going to move through this process and talk about what happens if we use the IRS data retrieval tool, and then we're also going to take a look at what happens if we don't, okay? And we would always ever just use one or the other, but I wanted you to see both possibilities of how to move through the FAFSA. So it's asking us questions about our tax return. We've said we've already completed our tax return, that we did a 1040, and that we're married filing joint, and we're ready to move on. And let me say this, back here we would click on we want to use the IRS data, we would click on the link out to IRS. It would ask us which parent we are, because remember that parent is linked to the FSA ID, but it's also linked to that social security number. So we would check the box of which parent is going to link out to the IRS. And now we're going to go through the steps of what that looks like to actually go out to the IRS and use the data retrieval tool. So here we are. We've put in our parent information, told them who we are. Now we're going to link out to the IRS. It's telling us that we're leaving the FAFSA and that we're going out to the IRS. This is telling it, making note that this is a federal, it's a government site. We're acknowledging that. We're providing some information. Again, it's a very serious process to move out of one federal site into another. They do everything they can to minimize identity theft and those things, but we're actually moving out into that federal IRS site. We're providing some information and we're submitting it. And so now we're on the IRS site. So we don't have to navigate that site. We don't have to do anything. It's going to download this tax information right into our FAFSA. We still could change our mind when we're out here and say, we can check the box and say, don't transfer it. Or we can say, yes, transfer this information now. It's gonna transfer it and put it right in the FAFSA, right where it's supposed to go. So it's telling us we did that and that it was successful. It really is just that simple. So why might mean, there's a few reasons why we might not be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. If our marital status is not equal to our tax filing status, if we're married but filing separate, because it can only go out there and pull in one tax return, if we have an invalid social security number, or we've been a possible victim of the IRS identity theft, we were a non-tax filer in 2019. So those are some of the reasons why we might not be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. So let's say we weren't eligible and it gave us an error on that. So now let's take a look at if we are not using IRS data retrieval and we just need to put the information in ourselves. So the first question we have is, what is your adjusted gross income from line 1040, line 7? It's going to tell us exactly where to pull that information from. So for us, it was 28,000 this year. Now it's asking us what are the wages for parent 1 and parent 2. So for parent 1, their wages were 16,000. It's telling us again where to get that information from. And so there's parent 1, parent 2. Asking us a few different questions here. It's asking us, did we file a Schedule 1? And so in this particular case, we're going to say yes. Were either of your parents dislocated workers? If we want to know the definition of that, we could click here. We're going to say no. This is asking us about some of the different federal aid programs did we participate in. We're going to say yes, we participated in the SNAP program. But again, you would answer those however they pertain to your family. If none of the above, you would just click the none of the above button. This is asking us for the income taxes paid for our parents. And so we're going to say that was $2,000. And again, we're getting that from line 1040, line 13. So some special questions here just about other kinds of income that we may have, whether we have combat pay. Remember, it's always important to remember, we're in the parent section. This is asking us about college grants, scholarships reported to the IRS. This is only if you, the parent, receive this information. And the only time we're putting any info, it's not just did you receive any grants and scholarships, is did you have to report it to the IRS? Well, the only thing you're reporting to the IRS is grants and scholarships you received over and above full tuition and fee in regular fees. So typically if you received aid for housing or something like that. So rarely do we actually need to put something here. But if you actually had to put scholarship information on your tax return, that would go here. Education credits, we're looking at IRS 1040 form, Schedule 3, line 50. If you have something there, it goes right here. Untaxed portions of your IRS distributions, again, it's telling you, each of these tells you, it's this line 4 minus 4B, and boom, that goes right there. IRA deductions, same kind of thing, telling you exactly which lines you're looking at and putting that interest there. Tax exempt interest from the IRS, line 2A, that would go there. So just look at the lines it's telling you to look at, and if there's numbers there, that goes on these places on the FAFSA. If your parents are divorced, have you paid child support? Okay, this is earnings from cooperative education programs. Is taxable earnings from need-based employment programs. So this is if you, the parent, receive federal work study. Again, you were the student, and you received, not if your student did, but if you, the parent, did. So again, a lot of times those are 0. A few other pieces kind of reversing things now. So not did we pay child support, but did we receive any child support? Are we receiving any housing benefits or military clergy benefits? Those kind of things. Different kind of benefits would go here. Tax deferred pensions, and again, we're looking at our W-2. These are boxes 12A through 12D, and it's only if it's these codes, okay? So look at both W-2s for parent 1 and parent 2. Any information with these codes on there, put those dollars in here. Veterans benefits, other kinds of benefits that are going right here. Other untaxed income that would go in here, disability benefits, type things like that. So again, those are the different things that would go into these fields. We noticed that our parent income was pretty low, so it's asking us if we want to skip the asset questions. Most of the time it won't give us that option, but it's giving us that option here. But we're saying no, just so we can see the fields here. As of today, that's a big deal on the FAFSA. As of today, what is your parent's current balance of cash savings and checking accounts? So you put that number here. Net worth of investments, again, as of today. And again, as of today, net worth of current business or investment firm. Remember, business is only if you have more than 100 employees, do you have to put information there? Or investment farm, it's only if it's a farm that's not your residence. You live somewhere else, but just have a farm that you work on the side. Assets, get a lot of questions on assets. There's a drop-down menu on each of these questions, and when you are asked that asset questions, these are the things that go on the FAFSA. These are the things that don't. So up here, one of the big things that goes on your FAFSA are the 529 plans you have. Money, cash, checking, and saving. Business is only if it's 100 employees or more. Investment farms only if it's a farm that you don't live on. Your home does not go on the FAFSA. Your life insurance doesn't go on the FAFSA. Your retirement plans kind of thing do not go on the FAFSA in that section. All right, so we have now completed that parent financial section, and we're moving to the student financial section. And we will not answer all of these questions for the students. That would be the exact questions in the same format as we would answer for the parents. And so we'll save a little bit of time and not reduplicate all those questions, but the student would start that process. They could link out to the IRS too if they filed tax returns, or they could input the information just like we did for parents. So again, we won't do all of those same screens for the student. At this point now, we've completed all of those things. We've completed all the financials. We're ready to sign and submit. Believe that or not, we have worked our way all the way through the FAFSA. We're just ready to sign it. This question is asking us if we're a preparer. That is only if we are a third-party paid person that's paid to fill out the FAFSA. And so if this is the student or the parent, you are not the preparing. You would just say no to this question. It's also going to kind of give us an easy to read version, though these screens are just vertical and much easier to read on the actual FAFSA, but just trying to give you a couple screen prints here. This is the actual data that we input, and it's just a good way to kind of see it in case we put something in wrong. Maybe we twisted one of our social numbers or date of birth or something. It's easy to see it here, and we can go back and fix it. So just a couple screen prints of that. We would just be scrolling down vertically until we got to the bottom, and we're ready to sign and submit. And so we can move on to the actual signature pages then. All right, so this is what they look like. So we're going to end up needing to provide a signature for the student and one for the parent. So we're going to click first on Provide Student Signature. It's very important to read this information here. This is really good information. Sometimes later down the road, sometimes we'll ask them to provide copy. They'll get selected for verification. Something we'll ask them to provide copies of their tax return, and they'll say, well, no, we didn't ever say we would provide that. Well, in this language, there's more. You can drop down. You're saying things like you're only going to use this financial aid on educational expenses, that you're not in default on student loans, that you'll notify the school if you are in default, that you won't receive Pell Grants at more than one school for the same aid period. So there's a lot of different things. There's actually more than that. It scrolls on down. So I encourage you to read that. You're agreeing to that before you actually sign. So then by signing, you're agreeing to those things. Sign this FAFSA would be for the student. So the student has now signed it. It's time to sign for the parent. So again, we would have to choose between parent 1 or parent 2. So if parent 1 is the one with the FSA ID, obviously they're the one that are gonna want to sign the FAFSA with their FSA ID. They too would have to agree to all of these pieces up here. But let's say the demo, and for the demo, we're not given the parent FSA ID, so we can't in the demo sign it for the parent. But it's still good to see this information when we're not able to sign. So for now, let's just say we're going to click Submit Without Signatures, and we're going to move to the next screen. And now we're actually ready to submit the FAFSA. It knows that it doesn't have the signatures here for the parent, so it's saying, did you want to choose another way to sign? Do you want to sign as a different parent? Maybe we initially clicked that we were going to try to sign as parent 2, but then we remembered it was parent 1 we had the FSA ID for, or vice versa. So there's ways to get back, and obviously you could do previous too, but there's ways to get back. But for now, let's just say, no, parent doesn't have their FSA ID right now, but we still want to go ahead and submit the FAFSA. Later on, we're going to have to come back and provide those signatures. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and file our FAFSA. So congratulations to Helen. Know that if we hadn't, this actually assumes that we did provide those signatures and that we're actually all ready to file our FAFSA. So congratulations to Helen. She's filed her FAFSA. It's given us some good information here about what happens next. You receive an email version of this page in 3 to 5 business days. It takes about 72 hours for the department to actually process a FAFSA. That information is going to be sent to our school. If you have any questions about your aid package, contact your school. You could print this page if you want. On this page is longer and it scrolls down, but one of the things you'll see on there is the most important thing is our expected family contribution. The demos all return an EFC of $999,999, but you would see your actual EFC at that point. It scrolls on down the page, and you could look at your IRS information. You could see the different schools that you sent this information to. Here's the 4 we sent, some of the different information that we put in there for them. And you have successfully completed your FAFSA. So I hope that did not look too scary. It is not. It's not hard. It's pretty easy. So what happens next? Well, you'll receive your student aid report that has, like we said, that has that EFC on there. The college listed will also receive that information. Once the colleges receive that information in their process, they will begin to complete the awarding process for your student. So that will then begin to generate award letters. They will begin to flow to you between November and March, probably more typically between January and March. You want to pay close attention to what is actually on that award letter, paying close attention to what of that is actually grants and scholarships, how much of that are loans, how much of that are federal work-study programs. And in the award letters now, federal guidelines are telling us to split those things into different sections, so it's very easy for families to understand what types of awards they're being offered. Timeline, August to December for our senior families. You are in that admission process. You're completing applications. You're communicating with your admission offices. You're doing college visits if you can. I know this is a crazy time for that, but as much as you can, you want to try to get a good in-person feel for what that college or university is actually like. By October 1st, you want to create FSA IDs. As we sit here tonight, it's October 1st tomorrow. So you want to do that as soon as you can, and you want to file your FAFSA as close to October 1st as you can, remembering that some aid is first come, first served. November through March, you'll begin to receive your award letters. May 1st is kind of the national cutoff day to get your deposits back from schools that you've applied to if you've paid some deposits. So that's kind of the day you kind of have to decide, this is the school we're going to. May through August. June is a big month for orientations at schools where you go. Probably your students will register for the classes, maybe meet their roommates, get kind of acclimated to the school. And before you know it, it is August and it is time to move our students in. Questions can seem kind of crazy. Well, obviously we're recording. A lot of times the questions we get about the FAFSA is if it's a situation where our families are divorced, which parent goes on the FAFSA? And the answer is whichever parent provides more than 50% of the support for the student during the year. And typically that's whoever they live with. But if every answer to every question is it's exactly split 50-50, then the truth is you just have to decide which parent information will be used on the FAFSA. The other question we typically get is the asset question, but we looked at that back when we were looking at those asset questions on the FAFSA. Some contact information for you if you have questions. Wish you all the very best as you navigate this process. I hope you will navigate it with confidence. You are going to do great at this process. There are your high school counselors, your college financial aid counselors are there to help you. Please take advantage of all of those, and know that you're going to do great at navigating this process and the going to college process. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.